and sustainable landscaping. We do have a couple of master gardeners here, I think. If you guys would raise your hands, please, let us see who you are. Okay, quite a few. The master gardeners today are going to help you with the service portion of this Learn and Serve workshop. So we've got a handful of our new trainees that are going to meet you over in the demonstration garden after this workshop. We'll do a little bit of weeding and a little bit of maintenance. The demonstration garden is coordinated by Clark County Solid Waste, and it has 8 vignette gardens that are designed to give you some inspiration and some ideas on different types of landscaping. There's an edible landscape, there's a water smart landscape, there's a rain garden. So enjoy looking around while you're in there, and hopefully you'll get some ideas. If you are interested in joining us, I have brochures here on the Master Gardener program. We train for 11 weeks every fall. This year we have already started, so we're in week 2 right now, but we would love to have you get on our list for next year. We take about 50 people a year, and we pretty much always fill up. So if you're interested, feel free to talk to one of the master gardeners here, or come and talk to me, or let's get you on my list so that we can get you an application nice and early in the process. Among other things, master gardeners can answer your garden questions in our answer clinic. We are out at the Heritage Farm on 78th Street, Tuesday through Friday. We can answer your questions via email or via phone, or you're welcome to come in and bring a sample of something that you have a question about. And we have these bookmarks that have our email, our phone, and our physical location. So we'd love to see you come in, and we'd love to help troubleshoot what's going on in your yard. A couple of upcoming events that we have. On September 30th, we're doing a water-wise landscaping workshop. We're doing this in conjunction with Habitat for Humanity. We have selected 4 Habitat for Humanity homeowners, and we're putting on a public workshop on their property. So we'd love to have you come and join us and learn about water-wise landscaping. And following the workshop, we'll do a small installation for these Habitat for Humanity homeowners. Participation is limited to 20. I have not provided the address here, but if you take a tab and you go to the registration site, there's no cost. It will provide you with the address. And we'd love to have you come out, learn about water-wise landscaping, and then help us to install a small landscape garden. One other item that we have before we quiet down for the fall is growing a greener green lawn. Weston Miller from OSU is going to come and talk to us on Thursday, October 19th, about for folks who really do like to have some grass, but you're concerned about maybe the fertilizers and chemicals that you're using. He can talk with you about things that you can do to have an environmentally sustainable lawn. So we'd love to have you come and join us for that. All of our workshops are advertised on our Clark County Extension website, so if you have heard something that piques your interest here, you'll find all of the information on our website under the gardening tab. And lastly, our funders like to hear about what we're doing, and some of the particulars they like to hear is some feedback from participants. So I have evaluation forms, and what I'd like you to do is if you could take a few minutes upon completion of the workshop to rate your knowledge of some of these different topics that are being covered today on a scale of 1 to 5. There's a before and an after. So we're hoping that you're going to show some growth, and that your before number is maybe lower than your after number, or maybe the same, but we certainly hope that you don't lose any knowledge that you came in with and go down. And plus that makes it look really funny on our evaluation.
Getting a little old, we might lose.
I hear you on that one. And then if you could share other particulars on the bottom, this is what I'll forward to our speakers so that they can continue to hone their presentation and share with folks what they want to hear. So are there any questions or comments before we move on? Have I missed anything major? I think most folks have found the bathroom, the water, there's cookies and drinks. Immediately following the workshop, we'll take kind of a 5-minute break to have folks use the bathroom or go to your car, and then we'll meet right over in the demo garden, and your 5 master gardeners will get you started on our service project. But I'd like to go ahead and introduce our speakers today. They came from quite far away, Elizabeth and Chris from Minto Island Tea. And I have to admit, I didn't even know we could grow tea in this area, and I'm really excited to hear about what it's like to grow tea and how quickly I can get some tea and learn about how to harvest it and create it. And so without further ado, Elizabeth and Chris.
So we're going to pass this microphone back and forth, which might be a little bit awkward, but we might also try to just speak loudly, but if you can't hear us, just let us know. And thank you so much for inviting us and your interest in tea. going to give really brief bios. Then I'm going to talk about the history of our tea plot, how it was established, what we've been doing in the past like 5 or 6 years to kind of jump start it into a new phase for our business, and then our vision for the future. And then Chris is going to talk about propagation. Then we'll talk about establishment of the tea, and then I'll talk more about the processing we do, and we can even get into brewing and just talking more generally about different styles of tea. We could talk just about oolong for 2 months straight, one type of oolong maybe. So you could go in so many directions talking about tea. It's an incredibly complex, rich history, and so we'll go into depth, in a lot of depth, we hope. We can go into greater depth at any point, ask questions, let us know, and we'll just stay and talk as long as we can, and keep being really inspired by all your interest in tea.
If I can just suggest, if you're having trouble hearing, there's a lot of room up front, so please go ahead and speak up so that you don't miss anything.
Testing points. Yeah.
Sweet, sweet.
Is this thing on?
Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth Miller. I grew up on a farm in Salem, Oregon. My parents did native plant production, hybrid poplar work, and other agricultural work, mostly essential oil with mint and mint leaf. And so I grew up working at the farm every summer like my brother and sister, did a lot of plant propagation, and tea was one of the things that we kind of worked on in the summers. My dad, Rob, planted this tea plot, which you can see in the photos here, as a research project in 1988 and 89. He met John Vendeland, who is an interesting fellow that had a background in tea and agriculture. He was in Hawaii with Alexander and Baldwin trying to establish a new agricultural crop for the Hawaiian Islands, and tea was one of the things that Hawaii was looking into as a replacement for the sugarcane, which was taken out by disease. He actually met my grandfather, who then introduced him to my dad, and John was passionate about tea. He was really curious to see if Camellia sinensis would grow well in the United States, and specifically in the Pacific Northwest. So John and my dad established this half-acre plot that's over 200 cultivars that were collected from all over the place. The majority of our plant material was collected in South Carolina, where the original tea plantation that actually still exists, was started by Lipton. It's now owned by Bigelow. The plantation itself has gone through lots of different hands, and the original plantation was sectioned off, and so there were parts of the plants, the original farm, that had kind of naturalized in the environment. Some of it was subdivision, there was housing development happening, and John actually took a lot of cuttings from that original plantation in Somerville. He also took cuttings from the Arboretum in Japan, so there are named Japanese cultivars, which we have in our tea plot. A lot of them are just numbers because they were random, cuttings. So people ask us often, what kind of tea do you have at your tea farm? And we say, well, we have Camellia sinensis as a vast majority. There's also Camellia sinensis assamica, so Chris can talk about more about the cultivars and how that goes into producing tea. But you can really make any type of tea from Camellia sinensis. It's really the processing technique that makes the styles of tea, though people do use selected cultivars to make certain styles of tea. But currently we make all of our tea as blends from all of the different cultivars, which from the naked eye you can't really tell any difference. So you'll go about 10 feet in this plot and the clone will actually change.
Yeah, it's one of the big challenges right now, is just reestablishing the map and actually reading what varieties are what, because as anyone who's established a research plot knows, that's really paramount. That's what that plot is really a gene bank. We're using it right now partly as production as well, and that's kind of a unique challenge of ours. But going back and actually finding what varieties are where and keeping them genetically true and not letting a lot of the seeds to drop and regerminate and start to establish crosses in there has been a unique challenge to us. So our main focus will go into that is trying to preserve this as a gene bank and reestablish new acreage that's solely for production, where it's not a different cultivar every 10 feet, but is actually a quarter acre of one type of tea. So it's a bit of a challenge. A lot of time spent on our stomachs in the army crawl looking for old tags and reestablishing things. But if people are interested, we could pass this around. This is kind of a map, or not a map, but there's old photos from 1989 through 1992 of the establishment of the plot, and it gives you a sense of some of the growth rate and stuff like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, so the plot was established and cared for many, many years, and throughout my childhood we did really small R&D on it, picking and processing, trying to see if there was, differences in the different clonal material, both in growth rate and in flavor, but we really didn't know what we were doing. You have to have a really developed palate, I think, in order to actually taste the different flavor characteristics in the clones, and all the processing techniques can affect that even more than the clonal material. So I grew up working with it, but it was never really being actively managed as a commercially producing plot. It was really just being maintained as a research project. We were visited by a group of Japanese tea farmers in the mid-90s, and it's one of my favorite stories I hear from my dad, where they literally dropped to their knees and were astounded at the health and just the general flourishing of the tea plants in our area, which is not really that surprising because our growing climate's really similar to Japan, actually. And tea, as many of you guys might know, Camellia sinensis grows all over the world. It's an incredibly adaptable plant. It's grown in Kenya, it's grown in Chile, up in Russia, all over Asia, of course. It's native to the Himalayas.
Is that why it was chosen? Because of its adaptability?
As a crop, as a commercial crop across the world, or
turn into that. I mean, at your plant.
As far as our place.
Yeah.
I think that
was a reason why he thought there was a good chance that it would work.
Okay.
Yeah, tea is the most widely consumed beverage in the whole world, and obviously there's a huge amount of possibility for it as a crop, and because so few people had planted it in the United States, I think it was a natural for somebody to do it, and it's like, I
feel like it's a common story with a lot of crops where people are like, oh, it can't grow here, but it just takes
grapes
someone to just take a risk and then it actually works. You know?
We often talk about Camellia sinensis as akin to Pinot Noir, in the 70s in Oregon, and it's a wonder that somebody didn't plant it before, because Camellia japonica, which is the ornamental camellia that's grown all over Oregon, probably around this park, is incredibly adaptable and happy in our climate. So, but tea is a very adaptable plant in general. So,
and I guess that kind of proved the challenge, akin to what I was saying before. We were expecting a lot of the varieties that we planted out to slowly kind of die off, and certain ones to really show themselves as the right cultivar for our region, and they all for the most, like 90+% of the 200 cultivars did really, really well. So it was a kind of a good problem in some ways, but it made it so that we had to kind of use a different set of criteria to start whittling down which ones are the best cultivars. It wasn't immediately obvious because of our climate.
And it's still not obvious. That's where our research is now focused. But even before planting, my dad and John worked with a fellow at OSU Extension, and they put the plants into like a freeze test and got them down to 40 below zero, and all of the clonal material survived. And even within this plot, part of the reason why it's so difficult the map is so hard to read was that they replicated the clones throughout the plot. So it's not just, one variety here and then it's nowhere else. It's 10 plants and then it's replicated in 2 or 3 other places in the plot, and that's so you can, be assessing a microclimate or shade or soil, drainage. So yeah, fast forward to 2008, Chris and I, we met in Colorado College. I grew up in Salem. My background was in anthropology and music in college, and
I studied ecology, and that's kind of my background, is more ecology, botany, and I was doing a lot of work in restoration ecology in California and some green architecture work, and I was always interested in plants and new developments in plants, but we started getting more into agriculture, and Elizabeth's father, we can go more into that, but Rob, who was responsible with John in the establishment of a lot of this, was stopping a lot of his nursery operations. At the same time, Elizabeth and I were getting really interested in pursuing a livelihood in agriculture. So we moved up to Salem back to Salem, up to Salem for me, and established our own business in 2008 and fully took on the tea project as putting it into a new phase of development and actually making it something that would be a commercial as opposed to just a research plot.
So we primarily grow organic vegetables. We do a 200-member CSA, go to the farmer's market, have a farm stand, and that's our livelihood right now. The tea, it's with like many other perennial crops, there's a huge amount of cost in the establishment phase. You know, we can't really make a livelihood of this off of a half acre of production. It's just not enough volume, especially for the demand and interest we're seeing in Camellia sinensis. So, you know, we're pursuing this along with our other ventures, but it's not primarily, you know, it's not our primary form of business right now. So we had an awesome farm stand manager in 2012 who was fresh out of Willamette with a business degree, and she had time at the end of the season to help us write a grant. We were encouraged by a friend who got a very large VAPG grant, so it's a USDA value-added producer grant. They give funds for producers in their, you have to show that you can produce the crop, but then they basically give you funds for value-adding a crop, marketing, branding, packaging. So, you know, if you're an apple grower and you want to develop a cidery, or grapes would be the same thing. So they don't give you any funds for producing it, picking it, no machinery, but we were able to, with the help of our friend and the advice of the USDA office in Oregon, they're the most highly granted USDA VAPG office in the whole country. And there's a lot of Washington grantees too, so I'd highly recommend that to anybody who's interested in this, and especially crop development. But he gave us funds for processing, actually taking the crop to the farmer's market for the first time. So bringing it to the first time where it was a commercial level scale of production, even though it's still tiny. It helped us get to that point where we could have a website and actually start selling the tea. And we've realized that education about tea is just a huge component of it, because tea is not grown domestically, at least not on a large scale yet. So there's just, people don't know what the tea plant looks like, or how the tea is even made from all different types of tea are made from one plant. So we see that as a big part of our farm going forward. Maybe agritourism, a tea house. We do a lot of tours, and it's just wonderful to interact with people about tea because it's fascinating. So Chris can go into talking about propagation. Does anyone else have any questions about that component? You're not ready yet?
No, I'm not ready for that.
Do I need to be talking into this?
Yeah, it sounds great.
But do I need to be talking? Well, I don't need to talk anymore right now.
I'll talk loudly. Is there any more on establishment or any questions on? I mean, we'll probably start with propagation, then we'll go into establishment, and then more into the processing and finished tea.
Just one thing. Does anybody else hated this, or speakers
So
up in Washington, you should go into that Sakuma's.
So John Vendeland, part of the idea with the tea plot was maybe we would be the plant material provider, because that's another component. Is lots of growers are interested in growing Camellia sinensis now, but there's not really a good plant supply, especially on a commercial level. So they thought maybe we would be, helping other growers get into this. So John, in the mid-90s, partnered with the Sakuma family. You guys might know of them. They're up in Burlington. They do a huge amount of fresh fruit production and have a huge farm stand. And they planted out 5 acres of tea. So based on our research and development up to that point, we had chosen about 12 cultivars with a combination of growing characteristics and flavor that we thought would be good to pursue for a larger planting. So the Sakumas planted those 5 acres with John. They established well. They were selling the tea for a small period of time. They pruned really late in the fall one year. You really have to be careful about how late you prune. It leaves the plants more vulnerable in the winter, which makes sense. And so they unfortunately lost a lot of their plant material during a colder winter. It was probably 8 years ago now.
I think it's chipped down. You might know better, but I think it's chipped down more closer to like 2 acres as opposed to 5. But I think that the health of their plants is suffering, and it's not on the top of their pile as far as priorities right now. There's other example, I mean, there's the Charleston Tea Plantation still in Somerville, and
It's mostly the
there's a
southern
handful of
United
ones.
States.
Yeah, Mississippi's a
University
big
of
one.
Mississippi.
I was thinking Washington. You guys are pretty unique to Washington.
Yeah, the Northwest, there's really no other. And
There's one in Vancouver, on Vancouver Island.
Vancouver Island, it's really tiny.
It's a small one,
It's
yeah.
called the Tea Farm, West Home Tea Farm. They have a pottery studio, so they do like the traditional teaware. Very cool. They have a tea house. But it's really the southern United States. The University of Mississippi is the only, like, besides Hawaii. Hawaii has its own research happening because Hawaii has been tea has been grown in Hawaii for quite a while. So even though that wasn't the cash crop that Hawaii chose, it was actually Kona coffee was what Hawaii went forward with. But there are a lot of small tea farms in Hawaii and totally different growing climate than us. So, but there's some good research publications on tea grown in Hawaii if anyone's interested in more technical stuff on the web. But the southern United States is where it's happening.
Yeah.
It's grown in every state now. It's some
Yeah.
trees.
It's hard. It's from what we have a hard time figuring out what's actually on a commercial level, but it seems like it's just about to explode.
I think there's a lot of, it's in a lot of gardens.
Great Mississippi is ready to go commercial this year. They've got
Okay.
huge plantations.
And that's South Carolina.
No, that's Great Mississippi.
That's
Yeah, Mississippi. There's the U.S. Tea League for more information. There's the Hawaii Tea Society has a lot of information on their website.
and they're spurred in the southern United States by I think some of those groups like the Mississippi Tea Company. There was the U.S. Tea Growers League, which was a big push that all these growers were doing to come together, and it's since sort of fizzled. But domestic tea is really on the rise, and we think there's a big possibility for it as a specialty niche, maybe not quite the level of the wine industry, but that same component of agritourism and the health associated. I mean, there's just so many directions it could go in the United States, especially in the Northwest, because we have a really good climate. Yeah.
I have, one suggestion. When you get questions, please repeat them because some people can't hear them coming from that direction.
Okay.
The other is, are you and other people planting these in hedges so they can be mechanically harvested? Or are you importing Asian people who work for the peanuts that they do in Asia to harvest the crop?
Yeah, so he's asking about the way that we design our tea plantings, which we'll talk more in depth about, and mechanization, which is a huge component that we think of as being essential to our success in the future. So we've planted 12 acres, and we know that there's no way we can harvest that by hand. So it's going to be a combination of both, and we've tried to start importing machinery. Very difficult to figure out what we need, how to communicate because of the language barrier. You're importing from foreign countries, lots of barriers there, but
There's a lot of equipment domestically related to like tea bagging and a lot of, there's a lot of domestic tea companies, but all on the receiving of the product end and packaging.
Not
But
the
yeah,
harvesting side.
the harvesting side, the processing side,
Processing's
it's very much Asian,
lot of
Japan,
Japanese.
Thailand. So a lot of that has been challenging, but our establishment has been, as far as spacing and hedges, has been in the back of our mind has been either hand harvesting and mechanical harvesting. It's designed really where it can be both. And that's essentially what we will be pursuing, is probably always having a hand harvested component
Is
for
the quality of
the higher end.
better with hand harvesting?
Oh,
Yes.
yeah.
And
You
just
almost can't get the prime 2 leaves in a bud by hand,
by
but
mechanical.
we don't.
machine.
Correct. Yeah, but we don't have the skilled labor for it. As you guys know, we have one of the highest minimum wages in the country, and it's going up. So that's a huge, and just competition for the labor force, even if you can get people. So that's a big barrier. That's
So-
why it hasn't probably been grown in the United States quite yet, because of skilled labor, just our economic structure.
Honestly, that's the big, that is the hurdle. That's kind of the tough nut to crack. It's not that the plants don't do well, they do well. It's easy to establish. It's not easy, but it's feasible to establish a healthy tea farm. It's really, what do you do after that once the plants are in? How do
We
you
don't
handle
quite know the answer to
how do you
it.
handle the labor issue and make it economic to the point where it's not astronomically more expensive than what people are used to based on Asian, labor rates a lot of times.
That's a big question we're asking ourselves, is how valuable is local, organic, domestically produced? How valuable is that compared to the quality of the tea? We're doing whole leaf artisan tea, but is it as good as something that's picked in Japan or high mountain China? And so those are all the factors we're asking ourselves as we look to scale this into a real venture that can support not only us but other potential tea farmers.
You have a question?
I had two questions. I just mainly because of something else, but I was wondering how long was it from the time when you started thinking about this? You planted your first plants to the time when you were able to finally sell a product. How long of a period was that?
Well, they were established as a research project when we were probably 10 or 12 years old. So it was something that we were very lucky to come into as an already established plot in order that it was ready to take it to that scale because of the history. But from what we've read, 3 to 5 years is really the first commercial harvest that you'll get off of a new established plant.
Yeah, if Elizabeth's father had wanted to turn it commercial right off the bat and actually be harvesting and processing tea, these were established in 89. By 93 or 94, he probably could have been justifiably harvesting tips and making tea off of it as far as the maturity of the plant.
But I'd say more like 5 to 8, just like many perennials. You get a initial harvest in the first couple of years, but you don't reach peak production. So we're learning a lot about hedge shaping and maintenance, and not only shaping the hedge so that you get as many tips, but the picking schedule that you do also encourages more flushes and tips. So there's a lot for us to learn, and
so for that reason,
more in 3 years about.
That's why it's taking us. We got a lot of attention because of this project in general, but in trying to move away from using that half acre as a production acreage and actually move our production acreage elsewhere where we have, like I was saying, like a quarter acre of one type of tea. It takes a while, so we're still in that establishment phase. Most of that acreage was established some 3 years ago, some 2 years ago. The bulk of it was last year that's been planted out. So really that's not going to come online for us to be harvesting for probably 3 to 4 more years at this point. So it's a little, we get a little impatient too because we want to be managing that half acre for genetics and not necessarily production. But like all perennials, a lot of it takes time. But once it's established, tea is one of those amazing plants. It can go for
There's
a really
trees
long
that are 1,000 years old.
It's a really long-living plant. And there'll be a section. Yeah, it's naturally kind of a small tree. That's its natural growth habit. So the hedging and that pruning, that shaping is merely for the human body or the machinery to establish, an easy harvesting regime. So there have been old tea forests that I think were purposely grown that way, right? Were they just let?
Probably both. I mean, I know there's been a lot of people coming back to older plantings and then actively managing them commercially. And I mean, there's thousands of acres of tea, and much of it's in a native habitat still in high mountain China, and that's where some of the most valuable teas are because of the elevation. And people talk about being able to taste old growth tea. I mean, there's so many stories of tea plants that I think that's happening now where they're coming back to tea trees and managing them more actively.
And I haven't really told you this, but I have plans to take a section of our acreage and just not prune it, just as a visual for people to see what it looks like unmanaged. I think it's a really good visual.
It might make sense to just talk basically about the establishment of, since we're kind of on that vein, rather than jumping into propagation.
And then propagation, sure. Yeah.
Have you guys traveled overseas, Japan or China, and actually got to witness or work in or experience cultivation, but harvesting and practicing and rolling and whatever else that goes involved in the tea making process? Or is that something?
The question is, have we gone overseas and seen other tea producing regions and seen how a lot of the work is done? And we've done some in Vietnam, but we honestly haven't as much as we should, partly because we're farmers and we can't leave a lot of times when that's happening. It's unfortunate, but that is one of our top priorities. And honestly,
Japan in particular,
we've had a lot of recent Japanese tea farmers find us and
just
come
randomly,
to our farm.
speaking no English, just come showing. Really amazing. I mean, just three separate people
ones, and
finding us.
everyone has been so gracious and really nice, and has invited us to stay on their tea farm and do exactly that. Like, and it's very important. It's so important. What'd you say?
Close knit.
Yeah, it's close knit. Yep. And their teas are amazing. That's like the Japanese greens, which we do have quite a bit varieties of that style. There's a whole other growing style related to senchas and matchas that we're going to try to replicate with some of our green tea cultivars. Involved with shade, like 3 weeks before harvest, they put up these large shade cloths, or longer. Used to be more like thatch shade, and that shading prior to harvest has all these biochemical changes, caffeine levels in the leaf spike.
Antioxidant content goes way up, and a lot of the grassy vegetal flavors that you'll get from the Japanese green teas are also from that.
So the amino acids like go way up, so you get this like savory element to it. It's really fascinating. But it's that kind of stuff that you just
sounds something to be interested in, just like, you know.
Oh, it's fast. And you could go just to Taiwan and study oolongs, or just to Darjeeling. I mean, that's what's so interesting about tea is it's so regionally specific, and the traditions are so long, and they might even, vary from village to village. And the world of tea processing